This is the brand new W206 Mercedes C-Class, the definition of luxury in this segment. So let's jump behind the wheel and see how it all comes together. But before we do, huge thanks to my friends at Mercedes-Benz of Milwaukee for letting me have a go. One thing to be aware of right off the bat is the philosophy of this car. So many times we see competitors trying to blend luxury and sport, and what you end up with is something it's not really either. It's not really all that sporty, and it makes compromises in the luxury department because, well, it's trying to be sporty. Mercedes has doubled down on the luxury side of it for this generation. Under the hood, you have a familiar 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. This time, though, it's making the same 255 horsepower, but the torque is up 25 pound-feet to 295. There's also another first for this engine. This is the first time we've seen Mercedes put their EQ Boost 48-volt mild hybrid system on this 4-cylinder. And that new hybrid system adds another 20 horsepower and 148 pound-feet of torque for short bursts of time, which means 0 to 60 is done in about 5.6 seconds, at least in my testing. Now, more power and more speed never hurts, but remember that I said at the beginning of this video that this is leaning toward the luxury side of things, so refinement is key along with the ride. The mild hybrid system seamlessly blends the auto start-stop system to the point where you barely even notice it, and it's a big reason that the fuel economy is up to 28 mpg for these 4MATIC all-wheel drive models, and that's of course combined figure. The 48-volt system will also run things like some onboard electronics, so there's less the gas engine has to do, thus making it more efficient. But there's another big thing contributing to the improved economy of this car, and that's the transmission. Mercedes generally always develops their transmissions in-house, which is a good thing because then they have complete control with how the packaging is done and how the tailoring comes together to match the car. The transmission here is still a 9-speed, but it's totally new from any of the other previous units. It's smaller, it's 33% lighter, and it's more efficient. And not only that, it's quick, it's smart, and it is incredibly smooth. So power is plentiful, and it comes on very smooth, so from a power delivery perspective, it's incredibly luxurious feeling. But then there's the ride itself. And what we have here is a car that's 2.5 inches longer and almost half an inch wider. And what this results in is a more planted feeling on the road, and mixed with the fact that you have adaptive dampers and a multi-link rear suspension, the car is very comfortable over bumps and any sort of road imperfections. Again, the C-Class steers more toward luxury than sport, so in comfort mode the ride is truly comfortable, but dialed up into sport mode, the car tenses up as you'd want it to. Overall, the driving experience is fantastic and probably the most befitting of the Mercedes logo that I've tested in a C-Class, at least in a really, really long time. The visibility is fantastic. The cabin isolation is really quiet and relaxing. The suspension is supple and calm, even over some bumps that we've talked about. And you still have the ability to stiffen things up, dial things up into sport mode with big power and stiffer dampers. Ultimately, it won't sport up in the same way that an Alfa Romeo or BMW would, but that's the point. It does do the luxury thing better than both those cars, and we'll get to that when we talk about the interior. So somehow in my infinite wisdom I managed to mute my own mic pack during the next portion of this video, so I'm going to do the exterior walk around in voiceover. Now this is a Mercedes sedan, which means whatever the S-Class looks like, this thing will look like the smaller version. Which isn't a bad thing, and it's befitting of the entire personality of the car. Up front you have completely LED headlights as standard, and for $1,000 extra you can option projectors that will project directions onto the road in front of you. Between them is a pretty simple grille, but you can upgrade to have something very reminiscent of what you'd see on the Mercedes F1 car, the star pattern inlaid into the grille. You do have a less aggressive version of the power dome hood here, despite this not being an AMG. And then on your front fascia, you have a mix of fake and real venting. Around the side, you have 19-inch wheels. You have a long hood. And remember, this car is 2.5 inches longer than last year. You have very subtle dual body lines on the side, but aside from that, it's a pretty simple profile. Around the rear, the design is incredibly simple, as we've come to expect from Mercedes. The taillights are not sequential, but they are very S-Class and look pretty cool. And then really the only other thing going on the back is the incredibly fake exhaust. But the best part of this car is the interior, so let's step inside. Now, I've been saying this whole video that this thing is more on the luxe side than on the sport side. It's essentially like a mini S-Class, and nowhere is that more apparent than here on the interior. I mean, just look at this thing. The design is spectacular. You just feel more special than you would in something like a BMW or an Audi. You've got two massive screens. Your digital gauge cluster is 12.3 inches. It's totally customizable. It'll change with your drive modes and really whatever you want. You do have onboard navigation, which is skinned to almost look like Google Earth or Google Maps, and there's a huge amount of detail. It looks really, really good, and you can get that in your gauge cluster. You can also get augmented reality for your navigation if you option a specific package. So again, we talked about that with the headlight. It'll show up in your head-up display to turn left, or it'll show up on your headlight to turn left, or it's really, really cool the way that they've integrated some of this stuff. And then speaking of the map graphics, of course, your infotainment system is a 11.9 inch screen, which is kind of square, more portrait oriented than anything else. But it's running the latest generation of Mercedes-Benz UX or MBUX, which I get along with really, really well. It's got wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. You get the new Hey Mercedes, talk to your car thing, which personally I never use, but hey, if you do, good for you. It's better than it has been in the past. You can get a high-end Burmester sound system, which sounds fantastic. You get 360 cameras, which are very good. You get auto parallel parking. This is something that Mercedes prides themselves a lot on, and it's safety. And with that, it's probably a good time to talk about the autopilot systems. They're fantastic. It's next level stuff. It's changing lanes for you, kind of like a Super Cruise or like Tesla's autopilot, or that sort of thing. Of course, with the caveat being no car brings fully autonomous driving. Please pay attention behind the wheel. I shouldn't have to say that, but here we are. Back to the center screen though, you can get telemetry readouts in your sport mode, which is really cool. You can see what boost pressure, horsepower, torque you're exerting from this 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. It's just kind of fun, And to think that this isn't even an AMG model. And then speaking of fun, you get 64 different colors for your ambient lighting, or you have preset 2-tones, or when you go into your MBUX system and you select like lounge or track pace or whatever the mode or mood is, I should say, it'll auto adjust your ambient lighting. If you adjust the temperature up, the ambient lighting goes red. If you adjust the temperature down, it goes blue. It's really cool. I don't think anybody integrates ambient lighting better than Mercedes. And the last thing I'll touch on in terms of the infotainment and the head unit here is you have this little box here for your fingerprint scanning, which will pull up your personalized profile from Mercedes Me, so that app, it's kind of gimmicky, but again, pretty cool to have like a thumbprint or fingerprint scanner here on your screen. Aside from that, there's plenty of charging in here. You've got a wireless charger up front. You've got a bunch of storage options all over the cabin. This one has a single sunroof. You can option a dual sunroof, so rear seat passengers can kind of get their own sunroof if they so choose. The rear seats are super usable for someone of my size. At 6'1", I can sit behind myself pretty comfortably, which is more than you can say for some other competitors in this segment. But ultimately, this interior just feels, again, way more special than anything else at this price point. The tech is really well integrated and thought through. The design is bold, modern, sophisticated. The materials remind you that you're in a luxury car at every point of your experience, and the driving experience matches the mood. It's a really fantastic luxury sedan, and that's, I think, probably a good time to get into the final thoughts. So with this C-Class, Mercedes set out explicitly with a luxury vision, and they've accomplished that incredibly well. I really like the self-awareness on this generation. Instead of going for something that's pretty nice and kind of sporty, we get something that feels very unique, incredibly upscale, and still has great power and nice driving balance. This W206 C300 is a big win, so thanks again to my friends at Mercedes-Benz of Milwaukee for letting me have a go.